Hello guys, my name is Riri. I am an artist and writer on Tumblr. Before we start, this is my first YouTube video, so I want everybody to be advised that first off, my editing is a little bit choppy and I am very sick. However, I did want to get ahead of this video before it was far too late, so let's get started. I was thinking of where to put this under YouTuber files or cinema. For those who may not know, I post things called my reads on Tumblr where I discuss different topics. YouTuber files and cinema are two of those topics. The reason why I am a bit conflicted of where to put them is because I am talking about another YouTuber and the subject she is talking about, which is obviously the new Betty Boop movie. The live action has come out and spread a lot of controversy as Quinta Brunson will be playing Betty. I want to say that I do not hate nor am I judging this creator. I am here to give my opinion based on my knowledge and what I believe. With that, let's get started. First of all, who is Quinta Brunson? Quinta was born in December 21st, 1989, an American actress best well known for her role in the TV series Abbott Elementary as Janine Teagues. She is the first Black woman to receive 3 Emmy nominations in the comedy category and to win Outstanding Lead Actress in Comedy in over 40 years. And in my opinion, just based on the show, I believe that absolutely every single one of those awards were well deserved. This has been a subject long talked about over the last couple of years, though it has never been as huge as it is right now. Betty Boop was based off of a singer known as Esther Jones or Baby Esther on stage. There's been some back and forth of if that is true, but Betty's famous line belonged to Esther, which was a scat singing style with her catchphrase being later copied by Helen Kane. So while you can argue, oh well, Betty looks more like Helen Kane, her style is not hers, it is Esther's. Misha Petrov is a politically opinionated YouTuber and Spotify commentator. I'll admit I did not know her nor her channels until my sister came screaming at me about her favorite YouTuber just spat out something she is very mad about. I did a brief overview of her channel and her video made just 4 days, maybe 5 when this will be posted. Misha joined YouTube in February 15th of 2021. Her first video was posted June 9th, 2022, named What is a Woman? And as interesting as I'm sure her YouTube channel is, I will only be focusing on what I know and on this one video and her opinion in that video. Of course, these opinions are my own and I am just here to express what I believe about this Betty Boop movie and obviously to react to this YouTuber. It is most important for me to mention, as I said, I am a new creator. I am very opinionated and most of what I say is more from an outside perspective, more of a common consumer, so anything I say will be fully my opinion based on the knowledge that I have and have seen. Yes, that is exactly how the title looks. They made Betty Boop black. The very first sentence Misha utters is, "This may look like someone that inspired the character Betty Boop, but that is not Betty Boop." There is not much to say here, and there wouldn't be, but she also shows a picture of Quinta. She explains that Quinta is helping develop and star in the new Betty Boop movie, and in her opinion, this movie sounds less like a remake and more like a historical story about Betty Boop's creation and evolution.
That may look like someone that inspired the character Betty Boop, but that is not Betty Boop. So Quinta Brunson is developing and starring in a new Betty Boop movie, and the actual film sounds less like a simple remake, more like a historical story about Betty Boop's creation, the evolution.
She immediately follows this up with saying it's possible to acknowledge that Black performers have influenced parts of Betty Boop's voice, her mannerisms, her style, and that is completely different from claiming that Betty Boop herself was literally a Black character the entire time, because that is just not true. And she says that Hollywood uses historical influences to justify, in her own words, and to reinterpret Betty's established character.
But people are already very upset because of this race swap, which we'll talk about. But I also want to say that it's possible to acknowledge that Black performers have influenced parts of Betty Boop's voice, her mannerisms, her style, and that is completely different from claiming that Betty Boop herself was literally a Black character the entire time, because that is not true. And I think in this case, it's obvious that Hollywood uses this historical influence as justification for drastically reinterpreting an already established character.
Near the beginning, she mentions people are very upset. However, I, for one, have always loved Betty Boop. I am in that circle of listening to other creators talk about and discuss topics that usually have a lot of controversy around them, and I rather enjoy it. And almost all the people that I watch, even people that maybe just popped up because obviously I was interested when this movie came out, were almost consistently saying something along the lines of, it is about time they made a Black Betty Boop, or there is no set race for Betty, or they bring up Esther Jones's past and her background, which is shown in the next clip as she herself shows a woman who says, who cares what her race historically has been? It is about time we had a Black Betty Boop.
I'd say that it's about time that Betty Boop is Black. Who cares what race she historically has been?
She immediately follows this with saying, well, anyone who cares about respecting the source material cares, followed by some kind of scoff, which to some, and me especially, despite always hearing good things from my sister about Misha, immediately became confused by what seemed like mockery towards another creator with opinions of their own.
Well, anyone that cares about respecting the source material cares.
It is time for Betty Boop to transform into a Black character.
The woman in the clip goes on to explain Betty Boop's origination, which we did already discuss. She then followed that with her thoughts on Betty's character and how she believes it was taken over by Hollywood and changed to be a white woman. That last part, which Misha completely ignored, and instead talks about a Twitter post where it was discussed that the movie will follow Betty Boop's evolution and origin from the original creator and directed by the creator's grandson.
But it's so clear that the whole Betty Boop character just got completely taken over by major studios and major Hollywood productions and transformed her into a white woman.
I also thought this was really funny on X. From discussing films, they said Quinta Brunson will star as Betty Boop in a new film. The film, made in collaboration with the creator's grandson, would follow the origin and evolution of Betty Boop through the POV of her creator, Max Fleischer, and they disabled the comments. So no discussing film under discussing films posts. So let's discuss it here, where I actually will allow you to comment. From Variety, Quinta Brunson to develop and star in Betty Boop feature film. The film will trace the origin and evolution of Betty Boop through the perspective of her creator, Max Fleischer, examining the relationship between the artist and his creation as he navigates the creative and commercial pressures of building one of the world's first animated icons, particularly as that icon begins to take on a life of its own.
She followed this with why Betty is so iconic.
A little history for you guys to know why Betty Boop is actually so iconic, such a big deal. It marks Betty Boop's first theatrical motion picture appearance in a starring role since the 1930s, when she emerged from Fleischer Studios' groundbreaking talk cartoon series to become the first and only animated independent female movie superstar of her era. Betty Boop is one of our nation's most beloved cartoon characters, yet somehow still remains pleasantly niche.
Quinta explains how she feels about this by saying, she has had a quiet but undeniable impact on culture for nearly a century. I realized there was a much deeper story to tell, which Misha pops in her own words at the end there to say,
on culture for nearly a century. I realized there was a much deeper story to tell, that Betty Boop was Black.
After some comparison to the Barbie movie reimagined, the column being read by Misha followed up with, a formidable female creator star reimagining a nearly century-old female character through a contemporary lens.
And I'm tired of that. You know, I'm really tired of this. I feel like that's getting old.
Yes, we can tell. Now remember how another creator who she directly called out herself and scoffed at mentioned Betty's past? Well, she will read about this exact same thing in this same column.
Now, there's also Kane. Kane unsuccessfully sued Fleischer Studios and Paramount in 1932, alleging Betty Boop ripped off her voice, likeness, and scat singing. The performing community challenged that notion, tracing the scat singing and gesticulations to earlier artists including black jazz performer Baby Esther Jones and cabaret entertainer Florence Mills. The judge who oversaw the legal battle ruled against Kane. Earlier this year, the preliminary design of Betty Boop featured in Disney dishes entered the public domain. Okay, so now we know a little bit more about Betty Boop's history, which is actually pretty complicated. Most people just know her as this iconic flapper cartoon, you know, boop boop a doop, whatever, baby voice.
And I will pause here because that is for the most part incorrect. With the rise of social media, hundreds of people have covered Betty Boop and her past, outwardly criticized the film industry for not making her black. And most people, unless they are not into social media, which most are these days, have likely seen at least one person talk about it, if not had a friend or family member telling them. There is always that percentage that does not, but again, I am speaking from what I have seen.
But the character came out of early 1930s jazz age entertainment culture, which was heavily influenced by cabaret and, yes, black entertainers. There's also been a long-running debate over who Betty Boop was actually inspired by.
Pause here because the way she's speaking is heavily over-exaggerated. I was going to wait to say this, but you'll see in the next clip how carefully she chooses her words when it comes to talking specifically about black culture, which I can understand not wanting people like me who have opinions to call out something because they would, but it's very clear how she feels about the prospect of race swapping once again in these clips.
Then people debated whether Betty Boop's voice and performance style were partially rooted in black performance culture.
Because it feels heavily targeted there, that's why. Specifically when it comes to style and hair choice and or accessory, of course not everyone will look completely different. Many people dress the same, look the same, but there was a style from hair, dress, and jewelry that some see specifically from back then that more closely resembled black singers, especially in jazz.
You see some similarities between these two race swaps, the new Odyssey remake, right? Where people are debating casting a black actress to play Helen of Troy, an actual figure from ancient Greek mythology that is tied to a very specific ethnic and geographic context.
As far as the Odyssey, for those who may not know, and I myself did have to look this up as I am not really into Greek mythology, Helen of Troy is a Greek mythology story of the most beautiful woman in the world who was meant to be the queen of Sparta, but fell in love with a prince from the kingdom of Troy, which is what started the Trojan War. Greek mythology is not unknown to having many different kinds of species mixed, as well as different kinds of stories and different cultures kind of mixed in together. But on this issue Misha seems to have, I do partly understand, but only partly. I'm going to divert for a moment just to put in a little example personal to me. I will take from the live action Little Mermaid. I am all in when it comes to empowering women and being inclusive. But as someone who loves history and looking at the backgrounds of characters, I did always notice and used to love how much Disney used to put into their settings and their characters. Back then, they made sense and they were picked for different reasons. It didn't make much sense to race swap Ariel because of where Ariel's story takes place, which is the Mediterranean Sea or Denmark, which is obviously Europe. For the time of year, which would have been around the 19th century, it makes no sense with the culture, beliefs, standards, and overall race balance or lack thereof. If we did that kind of thing to Tiana, people would jump on Disney's back like a wild bull. So why ignore other cultures that have those same kind of balance in their backgrounds, such as The Little Mermaid? I also want to say that in the Odyssey, I do kind of support this race swap. I haven't read much on it, I do need to, but from what I see and how, unlike Ariel, who has specific, mostly physical traits that people have latched onto over the years that did unfortunately lack in the live action, the thing most known about Helen Troy was her beauty and, of course, the story that follows. Again, I am not saying that we should change stories, as ethnic and geological cultures are specific to each character, and it is important to their character and personalized to their looks and their home life. But casting a black woman to play someone who was meant to be the most beautiful woman in the world, to me, is the kind of empowerment that the world could really use. In Disney, with so many black characters being featured throughout all their movies and shows, whereas in Greek not so much, to me it makes sense more than the other, and with that context in it. But both are important to consider how people who study or belong to that group may feel. This, however, feels kind of different. Comparing an actual race swap to what could be seen as a race correction, in my opinion, of course, does not feel the same as swapping a full, as Misha puts it, ethnic and geographic context on its back. And I say correction only because obviously hearing the original story can be a little bit frustrating to many who would have liked to see her shown in that kind of light.
Betty Boop is a fictional character born from an entertainment era that constantly mixed and borrowed from and transformed different cultural influences.
Well, so does this day and age and culture. It has always been this way. We just discussed for who knows how long about swapping races. If you don't have a problem swapping one way, aka taking black inspiration and turning it white, then why can we not swap the other way? The culture that Betty Boop was based on was an African American jazz singer. Also notice how she dismisses Betty Boop's existence as a female character as if that made her less important and less influential, as if we did not also just discuss how influential she actually was and is.
I would argue the Helen of Troy race swap makes much less sense than Betty Boop, since Betty Boop came out of this early jazz age and there were absolutely more influences from black performers and those cabaret singers. But then
I do think both are extremely important and in their own way have their own degree of value. I don't think that comparing the two as more or less to make sense is really fair, as again they are completely different situations. With Helen of the Troy, it gives black women the spotlight of being able to play the most beautiful woman in Greek mythology. It has many adaptations, and again, this is not to double standard, but in my point, to say something makes less sense when both have their own value is not really fair to me. Betty Boop is a character based on a black woman who was never given any spotlight in the race she was based on, which to me is an unfair comparison to a character who is well known throughout all of Greek mythology in the race that she was written in originally, even in today's world. What makes no sense to me is being angry or saying that the race that a character was based on does not deserve at least one adaptation in the respected inspired race, and for a movie that the actual creator's grandson, who I'm sure strongly respects their grandfather's creation, said that they will and want to help with and want to explore.
on the other hand, people are acting like Betty Boop was secretly black the entire time, which is obviously not true, because the actual character we can see, the one people recognize, she is very much white, presented as this, white flapper icon.
In that case, shouldn't it make more sense, and shouldn't it be a good thing? If you do not want a remake, then why is there being an origin where they explore the background and inspiration instead of making a remake bad?
I will say the movie does not sound like a direct, live action remake where they're trying to recreate the original cartoon exactly as audiences remember it. At least that's what it sounds like from the articles. It sounds more like an interpretive story about Betty Boop's origins, the cultural influences, the evolution, and they'll obviously talk about that connection to black jazz.
Right, so I feel like this is why it's a reimagined origin and or adaptation of the woman who inspired it.
Also understand why people reacted negatively when people think of Betty Boop. They are not thinking about some 1930s lawsuit. They're thinking about the actual cartoon image they've seen their whole lives, the pale skin, the flapper aesthetic. Betty Boop's visual identity is extremely recognizable, so it's not shocking that people associate her with that image.
Well, actually, with the rise of her story, I think like 2 years ago, I think of both now, almost no matter what, but thanks for categorizing me with the normies, I suppose.
So when they just throw this at us, it's like, who's this?
It's Quinta. She has a name, and she is helping give a adaptation that I believe deserves some spotlight.
Well, that's not Betty.
Saying that's not Betty just because she's not a white woman with short black hair does not sound right to me. It sounds hateful to the idea meant to, again, and I'm sorry I'm repeating myself a lot with the same point, but to the idea meant to bring light to what could have been or maybe should have been Betty.
And audiences already feel exhausted with Hollywood constantly reworking old established characters instead of what? Creating iconic new ones. Why don't they do it? Why? Where did the magic go? Where did the creativity go, Hollywood? So even when there is this historical nuance involved, people will immediately approach these projects with suspicion because it feels like every nostalgic character turns into another cultural debate because they just have to change something. She has to be trans now, or black now, or disabled now, or something.
This is another thing I half agree with once more, because the film industry really is running low on ideas. Like, there were so many different things that we did not need, like another Toy Story. But again, this is not a remake. This is a somewhat of a correction or a way to explore another side of a character in the sense that she was not shown in the kind of light that so many, knowing her background now, would have liked to see.
I think if they wanted complete classic Betty Boop accuracy, they should have cast a white actress. That would have made more sense visually, or they could create an entirely original Jazz Age inspired character exploring black influence, because now this controversy itself is going to overshadow the actual premise of the movie before it's even released. Like, we even see this happening already.
She immediately lost me. So even for some people who hated the idea of another Little Mermaid or another Willy Wonka, who complained and who cried about another remake, loved the remakes, and just had a few, this could have been different moments, which is always valid. Like Ariel's hair, that's the only thing that really got me about the new movie. But to go online and say, just cast a white character and make it exact, is the opposite of the intention. Quinta outright says she doesn't want the one that got twisted, she wants a version that never got written, and I say yes please. Because unlike Ariel or the Odyssey, Betty's culture was never made into what it is and what it's supposed to be based on. So why not give her one movie to try to show that side that the creators want to show?
Also, instead of actually letting people voice their concerns, we have accounts like that immediately shutting down the conversation.
I really don't get people who complain about this, because there are plenty people like us who will run their opinions on their own pages anyway. So why deal with the flood of messages when either way it's going to be very, very, very talked about?
Thing is, Betty Boop herself was not a black cartoon character. Okay, that's what it comes down to. The argument is that a lot of the voice, the mannerisms associated with Betty Boop likely originated from black performers first.
This is exactly the problem. Not because she is a black character, but because she was a white one inspired by a black woman whose style and likeness and phrases were technically stolen from her twice.
Yeah, she was probably inspired by Helen Kane, but Helen Kane herself was accused of heavily borrowing from Baby Esther Jones, right?
Exactly, again, they didn't borrow, they snatched up her phrase, style, and likeness with little to no credit until what? 2024, when the internet started talking about it more loudly.
And a lot of earlier American entertainment absolutely borrowed from black artists, while those same artists, by the way, often received far less recognition and money. So that part of the story makes sense. I think there may have been a much more creative way to explore that history, though, than simply attaching it to Betty Boop directly. Because again, Betty Boop is not black. The character is not black. They could have made an original Jazz Age-inspired film centered around a black performer navigating that world, showing how studios commercialized and repackaged certain styles and aesthetics. I actually think that could have been way more interesting, right? Artistically, and probably less divisive too, because it would allow black influence in entertainment and history to stand out on its own instead of constantly being filtered through existing characters with these annoying race swaps.
We have pretty much acknowledged and established that they're not trying to make a perfect rendition with inclusiveness, much like what everyone was basically told and what everybody mostly thought with the live-action Ariel. They quite bluntly say they want to reimagine and include more of Betty's life and want more of her character in this movie. Nowhere does it say that they want an exact remake at all. It's not about a black jazz woman struggling in that time, it's about Esther Jones. I really don't understand the confusion. A new character isn't being made because they're trying to give Betty the style and life she was based on. Creators do this all the time with shows and movies. Usually with shows like Rick and Morty or SpongeBob, where people in the community who adore a character want to see what it would be like in another version of it. And that is kind of what this feels like. Betty has had many movies and shows, and it seems like somebody just wants to give it another look on what it could have been, what it should have been, and where it came from. I really think this comes off slightly racist, and I'm not insinuating anything about her, as I am just a person speaking of what I hear and what I think. But throughout the video, she constantly scoffs or just shakes her head at anything that pertains to a black woman specifically taking on roles. And yes, I do think most are valid. I am tired of it in general with a bunch of remakes, but they were written since pretty much day one, as they were based off of the same things in the same areas usually. Unlike Betty, who was not based off or set or even actually really given a race until color became a thing in cinema. And for that, I think giving Esther's story a proper chance is fair. Just the fact that she doesn't seem very open-minded to it at all and just completely pushes away any thought or chance of Betty's story being true. And all of this is saying if her story is actually the inspiration, but based on everything that she was known for and for the similarities on everything that lines up as well, and how common it was to twist or steal ideas from people who were less likely to speak up even in today's age, but specifically back then, we have no proof that it wasn't true. Why not, with even a little bit of evidence out there, just give one movie a shot that could possibly be rooted in truth about a woman who was given almost zero credit for what was essentially her entire life? And either way, if they want to spend thousands on remaking her, then let them. And if it's good, then everyone who is so grumpy about this idea is going to flip a switch anyway. I really do agree with some of her points. The film industry has focused so much on remaking characters that don't need it, that it doesn't make much room for characters that deserve it. And the film industry has really tanked in quality. It is slowly rising again. I think there are some good movies that have come out in recent years, but it's sad to see that because of this, there is no room for characters that deserve a little limelight. After this, she just says bye to her fans, the usual YouTuber stuff. I just want to say I have no ill will towards this creator. Everything here is based on my knowledge, my beliefs, and my opinions. Everyone obviously has a difference of opinion and ideas, and that is okay. Her page, again, is Misha Petrov. Please subscribe. I have so much planned for my channel, and I hope this can be a very fun, opinionated, and respectful space. Thank you.